CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the program. Our top stories: Ukraine's capital targeted by Russian airstrikes. Kyiv says all 18 missiles were intercepted. Our other headlines: 6 people have died and 11 are unaccounted for after a hostile fire in the New Zealand capital. Cyclone Mocha claims at least 41 lives as it sweeps through Myanmar and Cox's Bazar refugee camp in Bangladesh. And what future for Italy's iconic San Siro Stadium as Milan's 2 footballing giants look for a new home? Russia has launched a fresh attack on Kyiv, with Ukraine saying an exceptional barrage of missiles was fired at the capital. Ukraine says it shot down all 18 missiles, but is still assessing the damage. Moscow says the missiles hit their intended targets. At least 3 people have been injured. The strikes came as the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, concluded his diplomatic tour of Europe to secure more military support. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Shelby Wilder in Kyiv. Shelby, this is the 8th, I think, Russian air attack to hit the capital this month.
Absolutely, Jamie. As you mentioned, the 8th strike by Russia on the nation's capital since the beginning of May. It was another sleepless night here in Ukraine as Russia launched these intense attacks. It was one of the largest on Kyiv, actually, since this conflict began. Air raid sirens called out around 2:30 a.m. and less than an hour later, Russia had attacked Ukraine from north, south and east, launching various types of missiles and drones. These were launched by land, air and sea. They included 6 Kinjal hypersonic missiles, 9 Caliber cruise missiles, 3 ballistic missiles, 6 kamikaze drones and 3 unmanned aerial vehicles, but 18 missiles in total. And in particular, touching on this Kinjal hypersonic weapon, this travels 5 to 10 times the speed of sound. The Kremlin has said that these are invincible because they are extremely difficult to intercept. But because of Ukraine's support in regards to air defense from Western allies, it now has managed to destroy these. The first reported case was earlier this month on May 4th, when Russia had launched another attack at Ukraine using 1 Kinjal missile that was destroyed. But this morning, a volley of 6 of these hypersonic missiles was taken down, according to Ukraine, which is really just showing the effectiveness of the newly deployed Western air defense. Otherwise, all the air targets coming to Kyiv by Russia were destroyed, but debris was scattered among the city. We know that this hit cars, which caused them to burst into flames. It also hit buildings. Pieces even landed in the zoo here. The mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko, said that 3 civilians were wounded, as you mentioned. Otherwise, we heard of the head of the Kyiv City Military Administration saying that this assault by Russia was, quote, exceptional in terms of the density and the amount of missiles that were fired in such a short amount of time. Now, Ukraine's media reported that this wave of attacks early this morning cost Russia $120 million to carry out. The reports we are hearing is that this strike was aimed at trying to destroy the U.S.-made Patriot missile systems here in Kyiv. Russia is claiming that they did hit one of these. Meanwhile, Ukraine is denying that that is true. Otherwise, I woke up at 3 a.m. with extremely loud explosions rocking the city center. The Ukrainian air defense missiles were flying over my apartment building. I did not have time to make it to shelter in regards to going to the underground, so I went to the lobby of my building and waited this out. But it was a pretty terrifying, tense experience to wake up to this morning, Jamie.
It sounds like that, Shelby. Can I ask you, just putting Kyiv to one side, about the situation in Bakhmut? What's going on there on the ground as the counter-offensive continues?
So we heard the latest from Ukraine's military saying that Russia is on the back foot, that they are on the defensive, that they do not have the capabilities to carry out any other large-scale offensive action. But Ukraine did add that Moscow could continue to carry out drone and missile strikes across Ukraine. And specifically with the embattled city of Bakhmut, we've heard Ukraine's military say that they've now managed to gain control over some key routes there, pushing back Russian troops up to 2 kilometers. And other news relating to the front lines, we've heard that within the last 24 hours, 6 civilians have been killed from Russian strikes in the Kharkiv and Donetsk regions. Jamie.
Shelby, thank you for that. Our correspondent Shelby Wilder in Kyiv.
Thank you.
Well, Russia says its overnight strikes on Kyiv were aimed at Ukrainian fighting units and ammunition storage sites. Let's take you to Russia now and talk to our correspondent Stuart Smith in Moscow. Stuart, so what is Russia saying about these attacks?
It was a pretty boilerplate response from Russia. Indeed, the focus, as it always is when we get these Russia Ministry of Defense press statements, was that the attacks took place against military facilities. So, for example, as he said, ammunition, armed forces of Ukraine personnel, and also other military targets in Kyiv. Indeed, it did specify that one of those targets was what it described as an American-made Patriot missile system, which was hit by the Kinzhal or Dagger missile that Russia sent. But other than that, no talk about any other of the consequences just outlined there.
The Black Sea grain deal is due to end in a matter of 2 days or so. Has Russia given any indication as to whether it will extend that?
Yeah, well, when we talk about the official response, it was very non-committal from the Kremlin earlier on Tuesday. Dmitry Peskov, the press secretary, said questions still remained about Russia's part in the agreement. This is 2 days to go. And also said there would have to be a decision made on whether to renew it or not. That decision then, according to the Kremlin, still seemingly one that has not been decided. But frankly, we're hearing other things from different people. Some are pessimistic, including some Russian state officials, according to Russian media. Other news outlets are reporting in discussions with anonymous sources from business that they believe it will be extended. An interesting note from Ukraine's ambassador to Turkey. They believe that the online negotiation session will be held in the upcoming days, meaning that there are still people involved in this grain deal that are still trying to make progress despite the very little time left.
Stuart, thank you for that. Our correspondent Stuart Smith in Moscow. European leaders are meeting in the Icelandic capital of Reykjavik in a show of support for Ukraine. The 46-member Council of Europe, a human rights body formed after the Second World War, has only met 4 times. Russia was suspended from this group last year following its invasion of Ukraine. Let's talk now to our correspondent Natalie Malhas in Brussels. Natalie, what can we expect to come out of this highly unusual, this exceptional meeting?
Well, with 46 member states gathering for this meeting centered around the advancement of human rights, protecting human rights, safeguarding the rule of law, and advancing democratic ideals. Central to this agenda will be the body's reaffirming its support of Ukraine and drawing up tangible measures in which to do so. The military logistics, for example. Over the next 2 days, there'll be a lot of conversation about how these countries can and will support Ukraine going forward. They also hope by the end of Wednesday to have drawn up the so-called Register of Damages, an evidence log of dated and detailed incidents and claims of violence, damage, loss and injury incurred as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Turkey's membership is being looked at, isn't it? What more do we know about that?
Another big conversation topic on the agenda over the next 2 days is Turkey's membership in the Council of Europe, in a similar position to that of Russia, that quit the Council around the time of its invasion of Ukraine last year. This is related, coming back to Turkey, this is related to its failure to implement the court ruling dating back to 2019 around the arrest and conviction of businessman and philanthropist Osman Kavala. Kavala was arrested for his political activities, which at the time the European Court of Human Rights had deemed tantamount to silencing human rights defenders and trying to silence the dissenting views towards the government and the politics of the time. Should Turkey not heed the obligations of the Council of Europe, it could face its membership being suspended and its removal. For the moment, the Committee of Ministers at the Council of Europe has focused predominantly on discussion, bringing all the role players to the negotiating table and hashing all of this out. But should Turkey not do the right thing and implement that 2019 court ruling, it could be booted from the Council of Europe.
Natalie, thank you for that. Our correspondent Natalie Malhas in Brussels. The head of Ukraine's Supreme Court has been detained over an alleged bribery scheme. Prosecutors released a photograph of piles of US dollars on a sofa and said they had exposed large-scale corruption in the Supreme Court system. Kyiv has redoubled efforts to clamp down on corruption, a key condition for joining the European Union. Vodafone says it'll cut 11,000 jobs over the next 3 years, the biggest jobs cuts in the history of the company. The new CEO, Margherita Della Valle, says the layoffs are needed to help the telecoms giant regain a competitive edge. It follows a warning that poor performance in Germany, its biggest market, would hit company cash flow. The shares fell in Vodafone 7%. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, one of New Zealand's worst fires in recent years. Questions grow over how a blaze at a hostel spread so quickly.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliette Mann.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top story. Ukraine's capital is targeted by Russian airstrikes. Kyiv says all 18 missiles were intercepted. At least 6 people have died in a fire at a hostel in New Zealand, with at least 11 others still missing. The police say they're investigating, but don't believe the fire was started deliberately. Our correspondent Catherine Drew reports.
Firefighters arrived at Loafers Lodge Hostel in Wellington just after midnight local time, as the blaze took hold of the 4-storey building. More than 50 people were rescued, including 5 from the roof of the building. 1 person was injured after jumping from the 3rd floor. The collapse of the building's roof means recovery and identification processes are likely to take some time.
At this stage, we have 6 people inside. There is extensive damage within the building, and we have been unable to search all areas. There's a significant amount of debris from the roof collapse, but at this stage we've located 6 people.
Officials are warning the death toll is likely to rise, with a number of people unaccounted for. Local media reports say sprinkler systems were not working, with questions also raised over whether fire alarms were effective. New Zealand's Prime Minister visited the scene, telling reporters that all these issues would be investigated.
So we will get through this. We'll make sure that the victims here are supported. We'll make sure that our first responders are supported as well, because for our fire and emergency crews who are on the scene, clearly this is a traumatic incident for them as well. I know that they put everything they could into getting people out of the building. It is an absolute tragedy what's happened here.
The 92-room hostel was used for emergency accommodation, reportedly housing shift workers and those that are homeless. Some survivors spoke of their ordeal.
It was scary, being, first time I've been in a house fire, especially on the third floor, because, you're thinking, how am I going to get down? But, I made it out safely, but, yeah.
New Zealand authorities also said the building contained asbestos and local people should wear face masks and keep their windows closed. The fire is among New Zealand's most deadly blaze in recent times. The Prime Minister says a number of investigations are now underway to find the cause. Catherine Drew, CGTN.
France will introduce a new tax credit for environmentally friendly investments, part of a bill to try to green its economy. The plan, which will cost around $500 million a year, aims to spur environmentally friendly investments. This all comes as Europe looks to compete with US government support for American companies under its Inflation Reduction Act. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Ross Cullen, watching events for us in Paris. Ross, how's this going to work then?
Hi, Jamie. Yeah, we've heard from Emmanuel Macron previously speaking about this at the broader European level, trying to support European green industries here in the EU, as the US is supporting the production of electric cars, for example, inside the US for US consumers and US companies. So building European and buying European. Specifically here in France, the announcement of the Green Industry Bill by the French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire today to how to support that industry specifically here in France with those cash incentives to cover some of companies' costs when they're investing in, for example, wind or solar, just as you're going to try to help out a consumer with a tax credit if they are going to buy an electric car that has been built in the EU. We can listen in now to a little bit more of what Bruno Le Maire had to say.
We want to keep a very close partnership with the United States. We want to develop our economic partnership with China, but we also want to defend our industrial interests, protect our know-how, protect our technologies, protect our workers. Protect our workers, because at the end of the day, it's the workers we're protecting.
Ross, also taking place in Paris today, pro-nuclear countries meeting to discuss the role of nuclear energy as Europe transitions to a lower carbon economy. But it really is dividing Europe, isn't it, nuclear?
Yeah, hosting it here in France, 70% of France's electricity comes from nuclear, seen as a crucial point of national energy independence, that energy sovereignty that Emmanuel Macron particularly speaks about regularly. We know that there are many other countries in Europe which are either supporting nuclear at the moment or looking to try to invest in nuclear, from islands like the United Kingdom to landlocked countries like the Czech Republic, trying to look at another way of investing in energies that are not directly fossil fuel, but also where they're unable, for example, like in the example of the Czech Republic, unable to access offshore wind farms. There's other support from countries like Poland, which are looking to invest in nuclear. But on the other side of that, as you mentioned, countries like Germany, which is trying to phase out its use of nuclear, and also countries like Austria and Luxembourg, which are actually starting a legal action against the European Union for the European Union describing nuclear energy as a green industry. While it might not be green, one of the reasons that it's so attractive to countries like France is that it is very low on emissions.
Ross, thank you for that. Our correspondent Ross Cullen in Paris. Cyclone Mocha has claimed at least 41 lives as it swept through Myanmar and Bangladesh. The intensity of one of the strongest storms of the century to hit the region is concerning climate scientists who blame rising global temperatures. Our correspondent Ashik Raman reports.
The prevailing sentiment among the Rohingya refugees is one of the overwhelming desperation and despair. Throughout the years, they have encountered 5 episodes of flooding, 9 incidents of fire, and 3 cyclones. Many of the refugees we have spoken to remained hopeless and disillusioned. But even though they didn't feel endangered by Cyclone Mocha, they nonetheless took precaution to keep their family and loved ones safe.
Since last week, we have been getting ready to come here on short notice ahead of the cyclone's landfall. Right now, we're all trying to stay safe. I had to rebuild my house many times here because of all the disasters.
Authorities are calling it a lucky escape after damage report shows no casualty nor minor cases of injury. According to the Refugee Relief and Repatriation Commissioner, over 2,800 shanties have been damaged, displacing thousands of families and requiring aid. 278 shanties were completely destroyed and the rest partially.
We were fast to evacuate those most at risk, so we didn't see fatalities. We don't have high numbers of injured people. It is mainly material damage. And what we're doing now is we have teams of UNHCR with other experts on the ground making rapid assessments, identifying the specific needs in each camp, identifying what shelters need what type of support so that we can provide this as soon as possible.
As the weather settles and the Rohingya family return to their homes with whatever they have left, they are filled with hope and determination to rebuild. Timely action has prevented further loss of life in their community, bringing a glimmer of hope.
Our correspondent Ashik Rahman reporting. 5 men have been sentenced in Germany for their involvement in a jewellery heist in 2019. The 21 pieces stolen from a museum in Dresden were estimated to be worth just over $100 million and contain more than 4,300 diamonds. The police say most of the stolen jewels have now been recovered. The governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, has signed a bill banning state-run colleges from spending public money on diversity programs and restricting classroom discussions on race. He's widely expected to launch a bid for the White House and has been running a so-called war on woke against what some conservatives claim is a left-wing agenda in public education. Critics say the bill is unconstitutional and have promised legal challenges. Elon Musk has been told to submit documents to an investigation into the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. A court in the United States Virgin Islands wants to know whether the Tesla boss was referred to JP Morgan Chase by the late sex offender. The Virgin Islands government is suing the bank, accusing it of helping to enable Epstein's sex trafficking. Epstein committed suicide in a New York jail while awaiting trial in 2019. China has confirmed the arrest of a South Korean international footballer as part of an investigation into bribery. Son Jun-ho appeared at last year's World Cup finals in Qatar and plays for the Chinese club Shandong Taishan. South Korean diplomats say he was arrested on Friday and is receiving consular support. China's foreign ministry says the case is being handled under the rule of law and that the player's rights will be protected. 2 Italian football giants will face each other in a few hours for a place in the Champions League final. The difference is that Inter Milan and AC Milan are both playing in their home stadium, the iconic San Siro. The 2 clubs have ground shared for over 70 years, but they're now making plans to leave. Our correspondent Alex Fraser reports.
A footballing cathedral with one of the best atmospheres in the world. The 75,000-seat Stadio Giuseppe Meazza, known outside of Italy as the San Siro Stadium.
This week it's the hottest ticket in town, where a sold-out crowd will watch the Champions League semi-final between the 2 sides that call the place behind me home, AC Milan and Inter. However, the future of this grand stadium is uncertain.
Even though it is iconic, facilities for fans lack the comforts of more modern stadiums. Milan and Inter have been joint tenants since 1947. Now they both want to leave, either ground sharing together or by going alone and building 2 new arenas.
So what they say is that Milan is a financial capital. We got a huge potential, upside potential to get more money, to have corporate hospitality, and makes a lot of income from the match days. And so we need to rebuild a new one. With those revenues, we can compete on an international level with the English clubs, Real Madrid, Barcelona, PSG, Bayern Munich.
The San Siro is currently owned by the municipality, with both clubs paying a total of €8 million a year in rent. Europe's biggest clubs are able to maximise commercial opportunities with their own stadiums and the surrounding land. Inter's CEO says they could build on a site next to the San Siro, but hasn't ruled out moving outside of the city. AC Milan would like to build a stadium 2 kilometres away in the green area of La Maura. It's currently home to a racecourse and is also a protected ecological area. Protesters formed a human chain around the site, concerned that a new stadium and the development that comes with it would destroy the ecosystem.
This is a green belt around the city. It helps limiting the temperature increase, and also it's a barrier against the pollution. So we do not want a stadium here.
Any plans cannot move forward unless they are voted through by Milan City Council this summer. If the two clubs were to move, it would be difficult for the city to maintain and keep a stadium that's been standing for almost a century. But the idea of pulling it down has met fierce opposition internationally and locally.
The San Siro Stadium cannot be demolished because it is a symbol of Milan, like La Scala, like the Duomo, and Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. Could anyone think of demolishing these symbols of the city? They're crazy to think they could demolish it.
Talk of this great stadium's demise is at the moment premature. It will host the opening ceremony of the 2026 Winter Olympics. Beyond that, its future will be decided by the financial ambitions of these two famous football clubs. Alex Fraser, CGTN, Milan.
And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel, on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Inside. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to the weather forecast. I'm Tammy. Well, over to Europe. Wet weather is likely to favor the majority of the eastern half of Europe on Wednesday, with quite a lot of heavy intensity of rain setting the stage here across the northern portion of the Balkans. And by Thursday, there could see no big change in the wet weather forecast, and rain here across the majority of the Balkans will be weakening into some light intensity of rain. And here for the majority of the West, we'll still see some cloudy to clear conditions in the next couple of days. And here about the temperatures development over the next couple of days, we could notice that warmer temperatures for the majority of the West, while some cooler temperatures will be developing here for the eastern half of Europe, especially for the rainy area. So please dress up accordingly. And about business and travel, and we could notice that some cloudy conditions for Copenhagen with a high 14 degrees Celsius on Thursday, and over to Minsk, we'll see chance of showers in the morning hours with a high of 16 and low about single digits. And for more major cities across the western portion of Europe, Paris will see some partly sunny skies in the morning hours with a high of 17, and the overnight low temperatures will be just about 6 degrees Celsius. So please pay special attention to the big temperatures difference between the highs and the lows, and do put on an extra layer during the morning and evening hours to stay warm. And that is all from me. Stay tuned for more City Forecast.